Hey everyone, I found a couple papers that I thought were interesting to share about the social and political views of American professors. I found this to be an interesting topic because I've just been annoyed by the claims that there are a bunch of radical revolutionary Marxists or socialists or just radical leftists within academia trying to indoctrinate students to become fervent anti-capitalists who want to disrupt the system. In my last video, I talked about how even if there were a lot of Marxist professors trying to teach their students about a class conscious or to instill a class-based ideology, I'd be okay with that, and I'd like to think I'm part of that project. But to say that there is like a majority of these people in institutions, that would be a lie, and these papers kind of give us some data to refute those talking points from people like Peterson or Lindsay. So the first thing I found interesting in this 2007 paper was that only 9.4% of professors thought of themselves as extremely liberal, compared to 34.7% just as liberal, compared to 18.1% as slightly liberal. The paper notes that only 19.7% of respondents identified as any shade of conservative, as compared to 62.2% who identify themselves as any shade of liberal. But again, remember that the extremely liberal or perhaps radical liberal is only 9.4%, whereas the liberal or slightly liberal make up the big bulk of the liberal affiliations or left-wing affiliations in universities. The second point I thought was interesting was that just based on liberal, moderate, or conservative, moderate outweighs liberal by quite a bit, and the only field where it's clearly outweighing one over the other is social sciences, liberal heavily over moderates and definitely conservatives, and humanities too is quite a bit more liberal than moderate. But then you have computer sciences. That's where the most moderate are coming in, and the most conservative are coming in the business fields. So moving on, then we can talk about institution types. So non-elite PhD and elite PhD, they're going to be the ones that we're going to look at when we refer to universities or institutions. Those are the PhD granting ones, rather than a community college or a liberal arts college or BA non-liberal arts college. And so for total, we have 44.1% liberal, 46.6% moderate, 9.3% conservative, very close obviously to the one that just asked about professors across all the fields. This one is asking about professors across different types of college campuses. Again, I think big point here is that there's more moderates than liberals, so that's a point against claims that liberals are infiltrating, or even particularly radical liberals. But even here, you can't even make the argument that liberals are taking over or are being some sort of majority, because they don't have the majority. Moving on, I think the next interesting point was that they found that 51% of professors are Democrat, 35.3% are independent, with Democrat-leaning independents outnumbering Republican-leaning independents by a ratio of more than 2 to 1, and 13.7% are Republican. Apparently, these figures have been found similar in other studies, and they believe it was a definitive claim, at least for 2007. Moving on, though, here's another point that shows the social sciences and the humanities departments, as well as the other, as being the, most Democrat-leaning. Of course, remember, this is not about liberal or lefty, although you can make an argument that there's going to be more liberals in the Democratic Party. Remember, it's very different. There's a lot of leftists that don't want anything to do with Democrats. There's also a lot of moderates in the Democratic Party. So, moving on, we have a total of 45.2 Democrats in university systems, professors, 38.9 independents, 15.9. So yes, more Democrat leaning, but that's not saying much about if you are an anti-capitalist at all. Moving on, we have, let's see, here's another one I liked. So community college and liberal arts schools house the highest percent of radicals, 14.4% from community colleges, 21.5% from liberal arts are radicals. Activists as well, so 22.6% of professors at community colleges refer to themselves as activists, 21.3% liberal arts professors refer to themselves as activists. And liberal arts colleges are home to the highest proportion of Marxists, with only 12%, as compared to 3% of Marxists in community colleges, 5.2% of Marxists in other BA granting schools, 3.1% at non-elite PhD granting universities, and just 3% of Marxists in elite PhD granting universities or schools. So you break that down, and yes, we're going to find that the most radical traditions are in the social sciences and humanities. But even then, you're looking at 24%, whereas if you're actually going to take the label of Marxist, that's only 17.6% in social sciences and only 5% in humanities, and again, only 3% across the board. Only 13.5% of people across the board and university professors refer to themselves as activists. Only 11.2% refer to themselves as radical. Moving on. Only a couple more points from this paper. Let's see. So yeah, then they started breaking it down into the types of liberal, or the types, or the spectrum. So yes, we have the far left liberal, that are not even far left, but just, liberal. And that's where you're going to have a bunch of liberals at elite PhD granting universities, 75%, as well as non-elite PhD granting universities, 56%, liberal arts, 67%, so quite a bit, quite high numbers, especially the elite. Center left, though, you're going to have a decent amount of 36% in non-elite universities. Community colleges, we have, these numbers are not too far off, plus or minus 15 from each other. And then the conservative clusters, you're going to have the most conservatives in community colleges and BA granting but non-liberal arts colleges. You're going to have the least amount of conservatives in elite PhD granting. Moving on, and then I guess we can do total, so that's total liberal cluster is 54.2, total center-left cluster 31, total conservative cluster 15%. So first of all, let me just say something. If there's a conservative cluster of 15%, 15% of professors consider themselves conservative, that is much more than 3% of Marxists. So to say that there is a Marxist takeover, if that's your basis, then I could easily flip that around you and say there is 3 times a takeover by conservatives. And that would be a stupid ass point to say. So I'm not going to legitimately make it. Moving on, though, we have, I think there's only maybe two more points I wanted to make from this paper, although it's a good paper and I'll link it in the bio. Yeah, so just the conclusion. So they say, although we would not contest the claim that professors are one of the most liberal occupational groups in American society, or that the professorate is a democratic stronghold, so yes, they're agreeing with that. They have shown there that there is a sizable and often ignored center-left contingent within the faculty, and on several important attitude domains, and in terms of overall political orientation, moderatism appears to be on the upswing, that according to several measures, it is a liberal arts college and not elite PhD granting institutions that house the most liberal faculty. So yeah, that would make most sense, liberal arts colleges housing the most liberal, and overall pretty decent amount of centrist or moderate affiliation. So, and I was actually